Morning, guys.
Good morning, Deb.
Morning. Running just a little bit late.
Deb.
I'm excited for this session. Systems thinking is one of my favorite topics in the world, and I hope you'll gain a lot from the presentation. Okay, and there's 3 TED Talks inside the presentation, so it gives us some good, just some really great viewpoints in my opinion. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. Okay, so I'm going to go into sharing screen and get up the presentation. There we go. Oh, here, I've got to do something more over on this left-hand screen. There we go. How's everybody doing today?
Pretty good.
Good, good.
Oh yeah, I'm supposed to tell you that June can't come today because he is ill.
Okay, good deal. That was David?
Yes.
Okay, great, great. Thanks for the heads up.
Yep.
I've got this one being recorded, so we should be fine. We should get, I think I figured out, I don't know. I think I figured out the recording part, but at least I have the first half recorded and the second half recorded for the second class. I think that will take care of our recording problems. So you guys can see the PowerPoint, correct? Okay, good. It's not changing it. There we are. There we are. Okay. So again, we're talking about systems today. And the first thing, we're going to have a short TED Talk from Peter Senge. And if you don't know who he is a well-known figure in the field of organizational development and leadership. His last name is Senge. So a great resource for you. He has a field book out there that's very, very famous that I'll be surprised if some of your coworkers that have gone to colleges or universities will be familiar with him. So he's going to define what he believes a system is. So I'm not sure how easy these TED Talks are going to work, but I will we'll work with them and go from there. This one's a short one, so I think I can move it over so that it is shared on my screen. And if I cannot do that, I know it always takes a couple minutes here to load. Can you guys see the YouTube that it's getting into YouTube? No? Okay. I'm going to stop share then. And then I will go back into share the screen and get the right one up for you guys. This is the right one. So it's still searching for it, but there it is. It's almost there. You can see the screen now, correct? It's coming up, YouTube.
Well, the term systems thinking is really a mixed bag, and I use it very, very cautiously. First, both words are problematic, but the word system is the most problematic, because if you say the word system, the picture or image that pops up into most people's head is computer system. Like, you know, we need a systems expert here because our system's not working. The second most common association is management control system, as it's not my fault, it's the stupid system. Right? So these are the two associations that come first to people, and neither of them is what we're trying to help people understand. So whenever I'm trying to help people understand what this word system means, I usually start off by saying, are you part of a family? Everybody is part of family. Have you ever been seen in a family people producing consequences in the family, how people act, how people feel, that aren't what anybody intends? How does that happen? Well, you know, then people can tell their stories and think about it, but that then grounds people in not the jargon, you know, system or systems thinking, but the reality that we live in webs of interdependence. A family is a fairly close-knit one. You can kind of see most all the key players, but still, even though we can identify maybe on a list of 10 or 15 names, here's all the key people in my immediate family, still the complexity of interactions amongst all those people is obviously such that consistently families produce outcomes that nobody wants, which is the other kind of, you might say, fundamental rationale for all of this. It's not to, quote, understand systems. That's an abstraction. It's to understand how it is that the problems that are the most vexing and difficult and intransigent that we all deal with come about. And obviously, to get a perspective on those problems that gives us some leverage and some insight as to what we might do differently.
Okay, we'll see if we can easily go back to our PowerPoint here. Are you guys back with me on that slide? No? Okay. Apparently whenever I switch, I need to, there we go. Okay, so I'll know how this goes the rest of the way. So we're back on PowerPoint, correct? You guys are seeing it? Yeah, great. Thank you guys. Okay, so I really like, let's go back to that previous slide. I really like what he talked about as a family. A family is a system is all about interdependent parts. So we know that our interactions, our communication styles, all of our communication with our siblings, with our parents, with our grandparents, with our aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, all of that is part of a family system. So that kind of gives you a basic understanding, which I think is really good. And I think all of us think our families are somewhat dysfunctional. Well, in truth, I believe all families have some dysfunction in them. You know, if you had the perfect family, you would be an anomaly. So keep that in mind. Anyway, that's your first look at a system. So the very simple definition of a system is there are inputs, there's processing, and there's outputs. And what I've done with students in principles of management, I also introduce them to systems thinking. An assignment I usually give them is I'd like you to think about two organizations and two very different organizations. So for example, a construction company and a church. And I want you to put your thinking cap on and what are the inputs that go into each one of these systems? And what is the processes that are in the middle? What is the output? So that kind of gets you, you know, I didn't ask you guys to do that, but we're going to kind of go through that with a couple examples today. So to get you thinking in a systems view. And again, I believe this is so important that this is a part of every class I teach. MBA, Masters of Communication, the MSL, it's always part of what I teach. So very strong believer here. And so then from the output, you get feedback and hopefully there'll be some improvement is kind of this cycle of the process, okay? So let's think about, consider a school as a system, okay? This is a K-12 school we're talking about, kindergarten to graduation. So what do you think are the inputs? And I'm gonna ask you each one of these. What are the inputs? What is the processing? And what is the outputs of that K-12 school? And so everybody, if you would take your microphones off and really, you know, shout this out so it's brainstorming. I'm going to go just to this slide and I'm going to fill it in as we go. So inputs. Oh, it says screen sharing has stopped. Okay, so I need to go back to sharing the screen again, apparently. This is what I want. Okay, so I'm going to fill these in as you guys contribute what the inputs are. And I'll give you the first one. I'm going to say the teachers are, oh, and it's not letting me for some reason. There we go. It wasn't letting me, well, it still is not letting me add. What's going on here? Well, it's not letting me add, and it's not because it's the wrong color either. So I'm not sure what's going on. Well, so let's just talk about it. So what would the inputs be? Teachers is one of them. You know, what type of faculty you have. What was that?
The actual facility.
Absolutely. Is the facility in good shape or is it not in good shape, right? What else?
The parents
Absolutely.
taking their kids there.
Absolutely. Do you have the parents' support for the school, or are they kind of in a hostile in relationship with the school, correct? What else? Let's go right around the room.
Students.
Okay, students themselves. Okay. And as we're thinking of these things, guys, let's think about the quality. Okay. So we've talked about the teachers. You want to have great teachers. You want to have parents that are not depending on you educating their students on every little facet of life, right? You want to have responsible parents. What else do we say? Facilities. Waterloo really fell back on taking care of the facilities in the past. When I was on school board, they were in dire shape. Their buildings were in terrible shape. They have now gotten them so that they're up to snuff. But that's one thing our Union School District, I'm very proud of that, has always paid a lot of attention to facilities. And it makes a real difference to how the whole success of the school goes. What else, guys? Well, and I'm sorry, one more thing. Let's talk about students. The quality of students. So think about what would be the differences of the schools from a school in the Appalachian Mountains, a school in urban Boston, a school here in the Midwest? What would be the difference of the students? You understand it would be very different, correct? I don't know if anybody has the desire to go into one of the urban schools that are really a mess. You know, some of them are. So it just, whether it's drugs or who knows what it is, poverty, high rate of poverty, all that. So really impacts the quality of education that you can provide and the quality of your students. So what else? Let's get a couple more inputs.
Like books and materials.
Absolutely. There was a friend of ours taught school down in Missouri, and he was teaching chemistry, and he had to buy his own test tubes because he didn't have the equipment. What if you have a textbook that is 10 years old? That's going to be tough to be giving a good education. Let's have one more.
So I guess this isn't another one, but to go with the teachers is like other staff people,
Absolutely.
like janitors and secretaries.
Absolutely. And let's go back to the teachers for a minute too. The quality of your teachers. I when I'm talking about this, I use this example a lot when I'm talking to groups. And there's a real difference between a new teacher that doesn't really know what he or she is doing and a new teacher that has really great ideas. And then there's a difference with an older teacher that's been there for years and they're still very vital. And then there's teachers that are older that should have retired 5 years ago, right, guys? So the quality of your teachers. And when you have a high quality of teachers, high level of quality in your teachers, the school is going to move, families are going to move there just for the schools, okay? One of the things anyway. Okay, so processing. And the next slide here, oh, I'm not there here, just a second. So the next slide here, and I'm going to make it big because we don't need to stay small. You're talking about the inputs, how many processes, and the processes within the school. A hint is that these end in ing, so they're action verbs. So what are some of the processes that go on during the school? K-12.
Teaching.
Absolutely, teaching, absolutely.
Learning.
Funding.
What was that?
Funding, like money.
Absolutely. And that's some of the inputs too. The inputs, some schools have really great support for their financial measures. When you're trying to build a new school or put an addition on or whatever, the funding is critical, and that varies from town to town. What else? Let's get a couple more. Does anybody eat at school? So the cooking, what is the quality of the cooking? Does that make a difference to your school day? Absolutely. We had LaPorte City, they were famous in the high school that they would bake their own bread. And I don't think there's a better smell than freshly baked bread wafting through the school. Very, very positive about that. But busing, okay? Studying, hopefully people are studying, you know, that goes along with learning, but the ing words are really important, okay? So how about the outputs? What do you expect as outputs?
Well, like the knowledge and skills that you'll retain.
Absolutely. So they're going to be successful. You hope to have successful students when they leave the school, correct? Successful employees for the organizations, okay? Another input would have been the business community support. Is there support there or is there not support there, right? So what is your graduation rate? You know, is it in the 90% graduation rate? That would be what one of your goals would be. But this has to do with satisfaction too. So well, how many different levels of satisfaction is there in the school? Let's talk about that. Let's just say teacher satisfaction, correct? If they're satisfied with the benefits, they're satisfied with how they're being treated, that is a great output to draw more teachers in. Can you think of some other outputs?
Connections.
Absolutely, absolutely. Absolutely. Connections with the business community, connections with the taxpayers, you know, all of that. So can you see where this is the simple look at it? And you can just list the inputs, but I like to have people think about the quality of it. So, and even the maintenance, when we talk about the facilities, the reputation is an output. You know, do you have a reputation of a great looking school? Do you have a great reputation for a great drama music department, sports programs, you know, all those kind of things. Those are outputs of accomplishments that you want to be in a good system. Okay, so we're going to move on. I just talked about the qualities. So this is a great look and see how much time we have, and I think we're doing fine. This guy is Russell Akoff. He's just such a unique individual. And of course, he's not with us anymore, but this is his classic speech from 1994. And it can be compared to a TED Talk. And you'll see that he has a great sense of humor, but he has such a great understanding of systems. So I'm going to go to that. Again, it's probably going to take us a couple minutes to get there. But I think these TED Talks are just tremendous. Now, can you guys see the YouTube coming on or not? You can, okay, good. So it looks like it's going to keep it on the screen and I don't have to stop share and add share again. I hope everybody is doing well, staying up with all your classes. If you have any problems at all, let me know. I did make a video of how to make those changes and track changes. And it was just finishing when I got to class. So I will have that posted later on if you need help with how to.
Our next speaker is a scholar, a philosopher, a activist, a teacher, a gentleman, and one of the leading theorists on systems in the world. I take many conversations.
Uh-oh, this didn't happen earlier.
With Dr. Deming and other experts. And the most unusual and perhaps the most enjoyable was a conversation between Dr. Deming and Dr. Akoff. Dr. Akoff was one of the only person actually to call Dr. Deming Ed. And Ed really loved it. He was delighted and pleased to learn from Dr. Akoff. And I would like to think that he's tuned in now as Dr. Akoff speaks to us on Beyond Continual Improvement.
Thank you. Coming as I do at the end of a distinguished line of speakers, I feel like a pornographic movie being shown to people who have just engaged in sex.
Strange sense of humor.
In short, anti-climax. I should explain, I really wasn't arrogant when I was calling Dr. Deming Ed. He and I worked together in 1950 at the U.S. Bureau of the Census when nobody called him Dr. Deming. He was Ed. I was not called Dr. Akoff. I was called, hey boy. Quality improvement is something that my principal mentor, Winnie the Pooh, once called a good thing. You know, capital letters, he always had it. Given that it's held so highly, it seems curious that in several national surveys recently conducted, over 2/3 of the managers who had authorized the introduction of quality and improvement programs consider those programs to be failures. Now, the professionals tend to excuse that by saying the criteria for failure is irrelevant. It's not what we would have used. But that's irrelevant because the definition of quality has to do with meeting or exceeding the expectations of the customer or consumer. And the customer or consumer is the one who authorized the introduction of the program. And therefore, if their expectations are not met, it's a failure, whatever the expert thinks. So it's important, I think, to understand why those failures have occurred, given that quality and improvement are a good thing, so that we can increase the batting average. The hypothesis that I want to set forward to you is the reason for the failures is primarily the fact that they have not been embedded in systems thinking. They have been anti-systemic applications. Now let me try to explain what that means. First, what's a system? The system is a whole, spelled with a W, that consists of parts, each of which can affect its behavior or its properties. You, for example, are a biological system called an organism, and you consist of parts, your heart, your lungs, your stomach, pancreas, and so on, each of which can affect your behavior or your properties. The second requirement is that each part of the system, when it affects the system, is dependent for its effect on some other part. In other words, the parts are interdependent. No part of the system or collection of parts of the system has an independent effect on it. Therefore, the way the heart affects you depends on what the lungs are doing and the brain is doing. The parts are all interconnected. And therefore, a system is a whole that cannot be divided into independent parts. Now, that has some very, very important implications that are generally overlooked. First, the essential or defining properties of any system are properties of the whole which none of its parts have. For example, a very elementary system you are familiar with is an automobile. The essential property of an automobile is it can carry you from one place to another. No part of an automobile can do that. The wheel can't, the axle can't, the seat can't, the motor can't. The motor can't even carry itself from one place to another. But the automobile can. You have certain characteristics, the most important of which is life. None of your parts live. You have life. You can write. Your hand can't write. That's easy to demonstrate. Cut it off and put it on the table and watch what it does. Nothing. You can see. Your eye can't see. You can think. Your brain can't think. And therefore, when a system is taken apart, it loses its essential properties. If I bring an automobile into this room and disassemble it, although every single part's in this room, I don't have an automobile. Because the system is not the sum of the behavior of its parts, it's the product of their interactions. And that's been said here in many ways over and over today. Now, what does that mean? If we have a system of improvement that's directed at improving the parts taken separately, you can be absolutely sure that the performance of the whole will not be improved. And that can be rigorously proven. But most applications of improvement programs are directed at improving the parts taken separately, not the whole. The proof is complex, and I won't bore you with it. Let's just take a simple example. I read in the New York Times recently that 457 different automobiles are available in the United States. Let's buy one of each and bring them into a large garage. Let's then hire 200 of the best automotive engineers in the world and ask them to determine which car has the best engine. Suppose they come back and say the Rolls-Royce has the best engine. Make a note of it. Which one has the best transmission, we ask them, and they go run tests and come back and say the Mercedes does. Which one has the best battery? Come back and say the Buick does. And one by one, for every part required for an automobile, they tell us which is the best one available. Now we take that list, give it back to them, and say remove those parts from those cars, put them together into the best possible automobile. Because now we'll have an automobile consisting of all the best parts. What do we get? You don't even get an automobile, for the obvious reason that the parts don't fit. Performance of a system depends on how the parts fit, not how they act taken separately. You see, the architect, who's the profession that I think understands systems best, really has the fundamental idea. When a client comes in to see an architect and they say, I want to build a house for my family with 3 bedrooms, a living room, dining room, and kitchen, a family room with 2-car garage. I want it on 1 floor. I'd like it to be built out of redwood, and I don't want it to cost more than $10,000. What does the architect do? He has a set of properties that the client wants. Does he sit down and start to design the kitchen, and then the living room, and then the bedrooms, and then the garage? Is that what he does? Of course not. What he does is produce an overall design of the house. Now he produces designs of the rooms to fit into the design of the house. But he discovers in the process that he can modify the house in such a way as to improve the quality of the rooms. But he will never modify the house to improve the quality of the room unless the quality of the house is simultaneously improved. And that's fundamentally the principle that ought to be used in continuous improvement. The second systems principle that is ignored in most of the practices is that they practice in a way which derives from the work of Walter Shewhart, the Bell Telephone Laboratories in the 1930s. Shewhart developed statistical techniques for determining defects. A defect is something that's wrong. Now, this should be perfectly obvious. When you get rid of something that you don't want, you don't necessarily get what you do want. And so finding deficiencies and getting rid of them is not a way of improving performance of the system. That's easy to demonstrate. Take a television set. Go in and turn it on right now. What's the probability you get a program you want? Well, you probably haven't calculated it. I have. 0.01. Now, it's a defect I can very easily get rid of. All I have to do is turn the channel. What's the probability I'll get a program I want? Still 0.01, which means I have a 50-50 chance of getting a program I want, even less. Basic principle. An improvement program must be directed at what you want, not at what you don't want. And determining what you want requires your redesigning the system, not for the future, but right now, and asking yourself, what would you do right now if you could do whatever you wanted to? Because if you don't know what you would do if you could do whatever you wanted to, how in the world can you know what you can do under constraints? But people don't ask themselves that question. The last point I want to make is that continuous improvement isn't nearly as important as discontinuous improvement. Creativity is a discontinuity. A creative act breaks with the chain that has come before it. It's not continuous. One never becomes a leader by continuously improving. That's imitation of the leader. You never overcome a leader by imitating them and improving slightly. You only become a leader by leapfrogging those who are ahead of you. And that comes about through creativity. One final point about that. When we look at the models of quality, and we frequently point to the Japanese and what they've done to the automobile, there's no doubt that they have improved the quality of the automobile. But it's the wrong kind of quality. Peter Drucker made a very fundamental distinction between doing things right and doing the right thing. The Japanese are doing things right, but they're doing the wrong thing. doing the wrong thing right is not nearly as good as doing the right thing wrong. You see, the automobile is destroying urban life around the world. Just visit Mexico City, Santiago, or any of those major cities where you find congestion and pollution so bad that children have to be kept home from school. They're not allowed to walk out of doors because the pollution is so intense. And then we talk about the quality of the automobiles they're driving. It's a wrong concept of quality. Quality ought to contain the notion of value, not merely efficiency. That's the difference between efficiency and effectiveness. Quality ought to be directed at effectiveness. The difference between efficiency and effectiveness is the difference between knowledge and wisdom. And unfortunately, we don't have enough wisdom to go around. Until managers take into account the systemic nature of their organizations, most of their efforts to improve their performance are doomed to failure. Thank you.
Okay, we back to PowerPoint? Okay, great, guys. So what'd you think of him?
Quite a character.
Okay, wasn't he? I mean, I have shortened that before, just taking the very last off and the very first off, but I think these videos are important for you guys to get to know the speakers a little bit also. So the next one I have, you know, I do stop it at about 10 minutes, the next one that we look at. But we've got about 4 minutes left here, a little bit over 4 minutes. So we're going to go on. I wanted just to talk about a little bit about what he talks about as the system. And to me, you know, you may be thinking we're in a business technology and communication class. Why are we talking about systems? Well, communication between the interdependent parts and the interactions, it's just critical. It's just critical. I think he touched on there's another one here that talks about that we need to focus on what we want, not what we want to fix. You know, that's really important. If you can give somebody a goal and know that, and give them free rein and trying to come up with ideas to make that future a reality, that's powerful. That's powerful. Instead of just focusing on something that's wrong, fixing that little thing, and then thinking the whole system's going to be better. So again, when you're talking about an organization, I like to think about the different silos. And the next speaker is going to talk about that. But you need to make sure that accounting and marketing and sales and production, that they're all getting along. Because again, by themselves, one of the failures of America as leaders is we get so wound up that we are the leader of, let's say, the marketing group. And we do everything well for the marketing group, but we're not really thinking about how we work with sales. We're trying to get the best marketing group, but you've got to look at the whole system. So I love that he talks about that when your systems are taken apart, they lose their properties. The human body is a great example of that, Okay, so again, let's go on. How do we address, we still got a couple minutes. I think we can get through this. I really enjoyed the architect part of the talk, mainly because we had countertops. We had countertops installed yesterday. They're beautiful. Everything went really well. Now we can put the stove in, we can put the dishwasher in, and we can actually live there and cook and everything. So pretty excited about that. But again, you look at the first thing an architect or a contractor says is, how big do you want the house? You know, then we got to try to fit everything in it. Our contractor right now is working with a couple that they contacted us and talked to us about building a new home. And she just couldn't believe that her bedrooms at a certain square foot of the whole house were going to be that small. Well, you've got to figure out where are you going to give up? You're going to give up closet space. You're going to give up, you know, it is just, it's all interdependent. Okay. So again, that determining defects, that second principle is getting rid of them does not improve the system. And they talked about drugs and alcohol. You can take drugs and alcohol and make them illegal, but that does not prevent people from using them, because they'll get them. Guns is the same thing. Try to make laws against guns, but you just need to have people that know when and how to use them in the correct way without hurting other people, okay? So again, that I made that bold: recreate the system for what you want, not what you don't want. Okay, before we go to the next slide, we're going to go on to part 2, guys. So we see you in just a moment, okay?